Okay, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're starting at the very bottom of Pei Tes Amud Aleph with a new Mishnah, two lines from the bottom. It says the new Mishnah, Me'arvin nische parim b'nische elim. If you have the nisachim, in this case, while nisachim typically only refer to wine libations, here Rashi, the first Rashi on the Mishnah, about 20 lines from the bottom of the Rashis, says, Ma'ar b'nische parim. Rashi says, Hai miyayin vishemen ka'amar. Oh, very good. Now let's get back to the Mishnah. The liquids that are used for parim can be mixed with elim. Nische kvasim b'nische kvasim. Nische kvasim of one type of keves can be mixed with another. We'll soon see why kvasim are different and distinct from parim and elim. And as well, shel yachid b'shel tzibor, the liquids that are used, the wines and oils that are used for a korban yachid, can also be mixed with that of a korban tzibor. Shel yom b'shel emesh, and that which is for today can be for tomorrow. We're allowed to mix all of those up. Aval ein ma'arvin nische kvasim b'nische parim elim. The nisachim of the kvasim cannot be mixed with the parim or the elim. And Rashi tells us why on the second line down. Because depending on the flour amount, we know what the liquid amounts are. But if there's less flour, so then it's going to be pastier, and if it's going to be more liquidy, excuse me, if there's more flour, it's going to be thicker. So that's why we're not allowed to take a keves, the niske keves, and mix them with the niske parim be'elim. Ve'im belalon elu bifnei atzman ve'elu bifnei atzman, if the mixtures were initially already in place and then only afterwards vinis arbu, then ksherim, imad shelo balal pasal, and if they had yet to be mixed and then they got mixed up with others, then pasal. Hakeves haba im haomer, in regards to the keves that was brought with the korban omer, afal pisha minchaso kfula, even though the Torah tells us that its mincha was doubled, and we'll see psukim in the Gemara about this, lo hayu nesachav kfulim, while the flour was doubled, but it was not going to be that the oils were doubled. And that brings us to a Gemara, the open of our Gemara on Pei Tes Amud Beis. Mir Hashem will get toward the bottom of Tzadi Amud Aleph. Minhu, we have a brisa. The pasuk says, "V'hiktiru shelo yerav chalavim b'chalavim." The pasuk says in Vayikra Gimel Yod Aleph, "V'hiktiru hakohen hamizbech alechem yishel Hashem." The Chachamim learn from there that you're not allowed to mix up chalavim from one animal with chalavim from another. And the Gemara poses this as a question because, after all, if you look at Rashi, on the last of the longer lines, the fifth line down, Rashi says, "Hachanami lo yerav nesachim." So Rashi views this as a question on our Mishnah. If it's true that from the brisa from Psachim that we just saw, "V'hiktiru shelo yerav chalavim b'chalavim" is true, so why are we allowed to mix nesachim? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yochanan, no, it's only im nisvar arvu ka'amar b'diavad, im, if it was already done, that is when it's going to be problematic. That's only a din b'diavad. Lechatchila, of course, you should not do it, but b'diavad, if you did, that's what our Mishnah is talking about. It says the Gemara, that can't be that our whole Mishnah is dealing with a din b'diavad, because if that were to be true, what does our Mishnah say? Ve'ein ma'arvin nichse kvasim v'nichse parim ve'elim ve'afilu nisarvu nami lo. That part of the Mishnah seems to be, if it is b'diavad, then you're not even allowed to do it b'diavad. But that can't be that it's not allowed b'diavad, because from the Ketani Seifa, what does it say later in the Mishnah? B'lalan elu b'fnei atzman ve'elu b'fnei atzman v'nisarvu ksherim. So we see already that it would be a din b'diavad, that a din b'diavad in our Mishnah would be kosher. And if the last part of our Mishnah, well, the second to last part of our Mishnah is talking about a din b'diavad, and it's still going to be kosher, then michlal deresh lechatchila ka'amar. So which one is it? You can't say that our Mishnah is talking about a din lechatchila. So Amar Abaye says, Hachi kamar, you're correct. We're going to see a couple of answers here. Me'arvan yayin, we are allowed to mix wine, but only if im nis'arev siltan v'shamnon. If the flour and oil had already been mixed, then you can add wine. V'yayin lechatchila lo. Wait a second, that's not, you're saying that wine can't be added out of the gates? After all, v'atanya b'medvar mamur b'solis v'shemen, aval yayin me'arvin. So it seems from the brisa, a brisa that is actually here, Tosefta, it seems that from there you are allowed to add wine even before the solas and the shemen are mixed. So says the Gemara, you're right, third of the way down, third answer of the day, trying to figure out the first part of our Mishnah, says the Gemara, El Amar Abaye Hachi Kamar. This is what's going on. Heicha de huktar siltan v'shemnon, where you were muktar, where you already burned it, you put it up on the mizbeach, the solas and the shem and the flour and the oil, then me'arvin yayin lechatchila. In that case, where it's already muktar, you're allowed to add the yayin lechatchila, no problem at all. But heicha de lo huktar, but where it has yet to be brought, so then im nis'arev saltan v'shamnon me'arvin nami yayin, that if you mix already the flour and the oil, then you can add wine. Ve'im lav ein me'arvin. Why not? Because dilma asili aruve solas v'shemen lechatchila. Because then a person might make a mistake of mixing things that they should not be mixing. So therefore, we don't want to promote that, and we don't allow the addition of wine in regards to the solas and the shemen. That brings us to the halfway point on the page on Pei Tes Amud Beis, and says the Gemara as follows: Keves Haba'im HaOmer. We said that the keves that came with the Omer, it came with a double mincha. So where does that come from? Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis have taught us in a brisa, and of course, based on a pasuk that we are familiar with, the pasuk reads, "Va'esha lemizbeach tu kadbolo sechebe, uvi'er aleh hakohen etzim about." Oops, sorry, wrong pasuk. The pasuk prior, Vayikra chav gimel yud gimel minchaso shnei esronim solas blula v'ashemen yishel Hashem reach nichach v'nisko yayin revi sahin. So what does it mean when it says in minchaso shnei esronim, the beginning of that pasuk? Limed al kebes habayim haomer sheminchaso kfula. That when it comes to the keves that is brought on Shavuos, it has to be that it's a double mincha. Yochol, you might have thought that kishem sheminchaso kfula kach yeno kaful. You might have thought that just like the mincha is kaful, so too the wine is kaful. Talmud lomar v'nisko yayin revi sahin. No, that it's only going to be one revi'is. The wine doesn't change. You're right that the mincha is doubled, but the wine doesn't change. Yachol lo yeheyeno kafel. You might have thought that the wine is not going to be doubled. She'enu nivlal in mincha, so because it's not going to be absorbed in its mincha. Aval yehei shemano kafel she'nivlal in mincha. So we don't mix the wine with the oil, the wine with the flour, but we do mix oil with flour. And therefore, while the wine might stand at a revi'is, because that's an objective measure, it's not a relative measure, and we don't care if it's kaful, the mincha, you still wouldn't double the wine, but perhaps by the oil, which does get absorbed by the wine, by the oil, perhaps the oil that does get absorbed by the flour, that should be double. No, Talmud lomar v'nisko, kol nisachav lo yuhu el revi'is. All of the liquids that are involved in this double mincha, they're all going to be one revi'is. So the Gemara goes through a couple of havaminas. We thought that perhaps that maybe we should double the wine. The pasuk says revi'is. Argues the Gemara, okay, maybe we don't double the wine, but maybe we double the oil, because the oil, in fact, does go with the flour, and there's double flour, so maybe we should have double oil. Kamash malan, no. The pasuk says, "V'nisko kol nesachav lo yehu ela revi'is." Says the Gemara, my Talmuda, what type of limud is this from the word v'nisko, that we don't double the oil? So it says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Ksi v'niska v'karinan v'nisko. This pasuk is written uniquely, where it's written, the kri is different than the ksiv. The ksiv is nun samech chaf hey, and the kri is nun samech chaf vav. So Ketzad, how do we understand that? Niska with a hey refers to oil. That's a word that is nekeva. Niska de mincha kinisko de yayin. The oil that goes with the mincha, because the word mincha is nekeva, not shemen. The word mincha is nekeva. So the nisuch that goes with the mincha, which is oil, is kinisko de yayin, is like the libation that goes with the wine, which is that they're both revi'is. Ma yayin revi'is, af shemen nami revi'is. So therefore, after analyzing the Seifa of our Mishnah and looking at this brisa that we saw here in the middle of Pei Testament Beis, we learned that while it's true that with the keves there was a double mincha, we did not double the wine. The wine is always a revi'is. And we also don't double the oil because of the unique Greek ksiv of v'niska, what it looks like v'niska, that's the ksiv, but it's pronounced v'nisko. So we see a similarity between the nesech of the mincha, which is oil, and the nisucha yayin, which is wine, and both of them are a revi'is. That brings us to the next piece of Gemara, about 15 lines or so from the bottom of Pei Testament Beis. The Gemara continues as follows. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Asha mitzora, if you have an asham that was generated by becoming a Mitzorah, a leper, and you needed to get kapara to join Klal Yisrael yet again, and the korban was brought sheshachto shelo lishmo. It was brought the wrong way, so it's not going to work as an asham to get you kapara. But if you want it to be kosher, so ta'on nisachim, you need to bring all of the appropriate liquids. She'im iyata omer kain psalto. If you don't say that, then you're going to passel the korban. So it's going to have its requisite amount of wine. Says the Gemara to Rav Yochanan, I don't understand. Why did you just pick out that one case that would be puzzle? Maskiflar of Menasya Bar Gada, Elameata. If it's true that the Asham Mitzorah that was Shalol Lishma would not be kosher without the Nisu Chayain, why did you only pick that case, Rav Yochanan? There are so many others you could have picked from. What are other cases that are similar? Says the Gemara, Elameata, and we're 8 lines from the bottom of the page. A keves haba'im ha'omer. Let's say a keves that is accompanying the barley in this season on the 16th of Nisan. Sheshachto shelo lishmo, that had been shechted, but shelo lishma. So then tehei mincha kfula. As we just learned in our Mishnah, then the mincha should be doubled. She'im iyata omer kain psalto. And another example that Rav Yochanan also didn't choose was v'tamid shel shachar sheshachto shelo lishma. Let's say that the tamid shel shachar was shechted without the appropriate kavana. Yehei taun shnei gzirin b'kohen echad. We should still put up 2 pieces of wood, which was the amount of wood that it took to burn the tamid. She'im iyata omer kain psalto. If the kohen doesn't do that work, if he doesn't bring up those 2 blocks of wood, so then the halacha would be that the tamid would not be kosher. And v'tamid shel ben harbaim sheshachto shelo lishmo, similarly, yehei taon shnei gzirim b'shnei kohanim shemiyata omer ken psalto. I don't understand, Rav Yochanan, why were you only talking about one case? There are so many other cases that are similar. Says the Gemara, no disagreements. In Achanami, I agree with you. All of those cases, you're right. They'd all be puzzle if they were not brought kehilchasa. Even though they were done shalol lishma, you needed to finish out the korban the right way, respective to each of the korbanos, whatever that means. Ella, says the Gemara, Ella Amar Abaye Chadaminai Hunaka. So let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi's on the second to last lines of Rashi. Dibra Maschil Ella Amar Abaye. Rashi says Ella Amar Abaye Hadalo Amre Ella Ba'ashim Mitzorah is only because Chadaminai Hunaka. I was only giving one example. Everybody relax. I'm only giving one example of something that had it been done shalol lishma, and you didn't do the rest of the korban right, then it wouldn't even be kosher. No one could consume it. Pashat that that's true. He was just giving an example, and all of the other examples are also true. We are on the last line of Pei Testament Bays. That was answer number 1. And Rav Abba Amar Bishlam Hanach Olos Ninhu. I understand in regards to all of the korbanos that are olos, that I understand as to why it would be the case in all of the cases above. Ilo chazu la'olas chova, then karbe la'olas nadava. I understand that in all of these cases, you need to follow all the rules if you made a mistake with lishma. Why do we still need to follow the rules? Because if you have an ola that was a chova, you can always convert that ola to an adava. But maybe the reason why Rav Yochanan isolated the case of Asham Mitzorah was for a totally different reason. Elahacha, over here, by the case of Asham Mitzorah, ilo mukmisle b'milse, if that we didn't knock it out of the park and fix it, Asham Nadava Mi'ika. How is the Asham of the Mitzorah generated? It's generated by the person becoming a Mitzorah, waiting out his period of time of Tara and bringing a Korban Asham. There is no Asham that is an Adava. And because there's no Asham that is an Adava, so therefore we need to be extra makbid in the case of the Asham Mitzorah. There is no flipping it from a Chova to an Adava. So therefore, says Rabbi Abba, the last Shita on the bottom of Pei Testament Beis, on that last line, and the truth is that not everybody holds that this is the right name, but perhaps it was Rava. And that tracks because who was the previous Shita? Abaye. So it could be that Abaye said Chadim Nakat and then Rava Amar could be. We're not sure. Sometimes this is what happens when you have people copying things over. Rava is Reish Beis Aleph. Rabbi Abba is Reish Aleph Beis Aleph. One additional letter. Easy to make a mistake like that. But if I was a betting man, I'd say that Abaye and Rava is much more common than Abaye and Rebbe Abba. So it could just be a girsa change. And that girsa change, as you can see on the side over here, is the girsa of Tosfos and the girsa in the Kisvei Yad of Rashi. Good. So that brings us, we're right now on the top of Tzadi Amud Aleph, and we were questioning this whole unique opinion of Rav Yochanan. The sugya of Rav Yochanan started 10, 12 lines from the bottom of Pei Testament Beis. Why did he highlight that if an Asham Mitzorah was done Shelo Lishmo, that we should finish the rest of it Kehilchasa? And Abaye gave his answer, you're right, all the other samples from the maskiv, from the question were good, in Achanami. Rava says, no, there's still something to be learned here, which is that an Asha Metzora can never be done b'tor Nadava. So if you mess up the Chova, then you don't want to ruin the Korban. And let's see if we find a reflected shita of Rav Yochanan in the Tanaim. Tanya Kavase de Rabbi Yochanan, Daf Tzadi. We are 3 lines down. What does the Brisa say in the name of Rav Yochanan? A Brisa from Maseches Yuma earlier over here, and we've seen this a number of times in Shas. Asham Mitzorah sheshachto shelo lishmo. If there is an asham of a Mitzorah, let's remember, this animal was generated by the fact, the chov of this animal was generated by the fact that someone was a Mitzorah. And when the shechita was done, it was done shelo lishma. Oh, shelo nasan midamo al gabe bahonos. Or the application of the blood was not put on the right thumb, right toe, right ear. All of those placements of dam were not done properly. Harezu ola legabe mizbeach. It can still be put up on the mizbeach. V'ta'un, it's an ola, I should say, as it relates to the mizbeach. V'ta'un nesachim. V'tzarach asham acher lahatiro. So what do we see over here? Just like Rav Yochanan said, they made a mistake with the lishma. Guess what? It's still ta'un nesachim. And then the animal is considered an ola and can be put up on the mizbeach. Okay, at least you didn't ruin the whole animal so that there's no purpose. Now, it's still true, the last piece right before the Mishnah, v'tzarech asham achar lehatiro. Maskim. The Mitzorah still needs another korban. He's not done because the korban was done shelo lishma. I don't know how this works, but if the Kohen does the korban shelo lishma, how does the Choshen Mishpat component of that work out? I'm the Mitzorah, I buy an asham and you mess up. I don't know how that works, but those are, I presume, shilas that are dealt with in Choshen Mishpat. Fine, let's continue with a new Mishnah. We're going to stop at the end of the page here, about 5 lines from the end of the page. So let's learn this new Mishnah and a piece of Gemara. Says the Gemara over here, Kol midos shebimikdash, all of the measuring cups in the Beis HaMikdash, hayu nigdashos. They were all rounded at the top, and you may recall from a blot ago, we learned about this on Daf Peches. They were all rounded at the top, chutz mishel kohen gadol shahaya godsha lesocha, where really the godsha, the rounded part, was lesocha, was on the inside. In other words, it was unnecessary. It was leveled at the top. A little bit of a strange language. We would have expected to see the language of machuk. So it's a little bit of a funny language. Rashi says, Shahaya godsha besocha, shaisa gedola kol kach shahaisa nimchekes, haya ba'isaron. That when you would level the top, there was still considered to be an isaron on the inside. Remember, we were discussing this the other day, that if you had, like the wine bottle has a concave on the bottom, where you can literally place a bunch of fingers into the bottom of a wine bottle, it'll go up an inch or 2, an inch and a half. So that rounded space would mean, if you did that in a flour container, that you lose space inside the kli. So if the kli is an isaron minus that, so then godsha is an isaron. But when it comes to the kohen gadol, the isaron is fully within the levels of the kli, and therefore if I swipe off everything from the top, everything would be there. Now, here we're going to get into a 3-way machlokas, which we'll try to clarify in the Gemara, not pashut, but let's see in the Mishnah what's going on here. Midas halach, if you're dealing with a liquid measure, berutsehen kadesh, the overflow of a liquid will be holy, like a klishares level holy. Umidas hayavesh berutsehen chol. However, if there was extra flour above the rim, let's say you're pouring, and all of a sudden you've overfilled it, so all the extra flour that falls down the side is not holy. So this is his contrast. Liquid, the overflow is holy. Dry, the overflow is not holy. That's Tanakama. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Midas halach kodesh, The whole measurement is holy. Lefichach berutzei and kodesh, not terribly dissimilar. We'll have to see what he means in the Gemara. Midas hayavesh chol, the measuring utensil for the dry measure is chol, and therefore lefichach berutzei and chol. Bit of a different svara, but the outcome is the same. Rabbi Yossi Omer lo mishum zeh. No, ela shehalach ne'ekar v'hayavesh eno ne'ekar. Now we have to just describe what these words mean because they seem a little bit enigmatic. If I put an ounce of water into a cup, so then that's going to sit all the way at the bottom. If I pour in a second ounce, so the Mishnah assumes that the first ounce bumps up and the new ounce is below. And then if you keep doing that, so then we have an ounce at the top, then now I pour in a new one, it bumps up the ounce that was already inside the kli. Masha'ain came with flour. When you put flour over the top, you're not pushing flour from the bottom to the top. It just stacks. So water presses up the old liquid to the top, and the old liquid is what falls out first. And since it was inside the kli, therefore it's kodesh when it falls outside the kli. Masha'ain kain biyavish, it's not like that. That's what the shita of Rabbi Yossi is. So says the Gemara. Let's go back to the beginning of our Mishnah. Money. Who is the author of our Mishnah? Reb Meir. If our Mishnah is like the shita of Reb Meir, there was only chad gadush hava. There was only one utensil that was like that. And if you look on the bottom of Peiches Amud Aleph, the Mishnah there extremely clearly articulates this, that according to, is it that Mishnah or is the one before? It is... Did I forget which one it is? I did. So there's a machlokas of Meir and the Chachamim as to which which kalim there were in the mikdash, and one of them was one of the shitas was that it was 3 kalim. There was, according to Rav Meir, 2 of them were isaron kalim, and here we are. It's at the open of the Parakon Pei Zayin Amud Aleph, where Rav Meir said isaron v'chati isaron. Rav Meir held that there were 2 isaron kalim. So who's our Mishnah like? According to Rav Meir, there was only Chad Gadush Haba. Only one of the Isaron Kalim was Gadush. Yet our Mishnah says, Kol Midos Shebe Mikdash Gedushos, Nigdashos, that they were all like that. So that doesn't make sense. It can't be Rav Meir. And I Rabbanan, Chada Umachokava. And if you want to say that our Mishnah is like the sheet of the Rabbanan at the open of our parak from Pei Zayin, so there they held that none of the Kalim were Nigdashos, that they had the rounded top. So Mimanashach, that we don't know who the author is. So our Mishnah over here and the Mishnah at the open of the parak don't stim. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Chizda, we're a third of the way down on Sadi Amud Aleph. Rav Chizda says, La'olam really Reb Meir. Really, this Mishnah is like Reb Meir. Umay kol midos, kol medidos. Every time we used this particular kli, then it always had to be nigdashos. All right, let's talk about this triple machlokas between the Tanakama, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Yossi. Midas halach berutzei and kodesh b'may kamiflagei. What is this machlokas tanaim that we are seeing over here? So says the Gemara as follows: Tanakama sovar midas halach nimshecha bein mibifnim bein mibachutz. According to the Tanakama, he holds that the sanctity of the kli from when it was nimshach with the shemen hamishcha was both internal and external. So the liquid, the kalim that were used for liquid, the measuring cups for liquid were holy both inside and out. And therefore, when liquid would fall over the edge, it would be holy. However, midas yavesh was only nimshacha mibifnim v'lo nimshacha mibachutz. But when it comes to measuring utensils that were for dry measure, those were only sanctified internally on the inside of the vessel, but not on the outside. And therefore, when the flour would fall to the outside, it would not be holy. For Rabbi Akiva savar, no. Midas halach nimshacha bein mibifnim bein mibachutz. When it comes to the midas halach, the measuring cups for liquids, they were sanctified inside and outside. However, midas yavesh lo nimshecha kol liquor. But when it comes to the dry measure utensils, they had no sanctity to them at all. And therefore, when the flour fell to the outside, it wasn't holy. The Rabbi Yossi savar, I disagree with both of them. Idi v'idi nimshecha mibifnim v'lo nimshecha mibachutz. really both measuring utensils, the utensils that measured liquid and the utensils that measured dry. Both of them were nimshacha bifnim, they were sanctified in the internal cavity, but velo nimshacha mibachutz, they were not sanctified on the outside. Well, if that's true, says the Gemara, why then would it be that we distinguish where lach is going to be kodesh when it falls out, but yavesh is not going to be kodesh? So says the Gemara, because v'hacha hainu taima delach nekar umigava demana kaasi v'yavesh eno nekar. Now we go back to the din of our Mishnah. We had said in the very last part of our Mishnah that what makes liquids unique is that if I'm holding a cup and I put in a little bit of liquid, and right here I have in my hands, this is the first ounce at the bottom of the cup. If I pour in another ounce, then the new ounce sits at the bottom and pushes up the old ounce, and so forth and so on. And therefore, if liquid were to fall out of the top, because the original liquid was inside the kli, and we said the inside of the kli was nimshach, so that liquid's going to fall outside. So then we might have made a mistake and assumed that that it wasn't to be holy, even though it was already inside the kli. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Who cares if the liquid was displaced and the original liquid that was at the bottom was pushed forward? It doesn't matter. It's all about the person and the practitioner, what they have in mind. What did he want to do? So says the Gemara, Amar Avdimi bar Shishna, Mishmei Derav, Zos Omeres. What we see from here, by virtue of the fact that we don't care what the Gavra, the practitioner, we don't care what his mindset was, what we therefore see is as follows. Klishares mekadshin shalomidas, is that even though I only wanted that which is in the kli to be holy, we are concerned about that which fell out of the kli because it could be that the klishares are mekadshin shalomidas. That's why we care about the liquid. We are concerned that it might have been sanctified shalomidas. Ravina Amar. Ravina says, Le'olamei malach klishares ein mekadshin shalomidas. Really, I disagree. No. Really, we're not concerned at all about a klishares, and a klishares is not mekadesh shalomidas, and it is what the practitioner cares about. So that we see as a machlokes amuraim between Rav and Ravina. So why then, according to Ravina, if we're not concerned about a klishares that is mekadesh shalomidas, then what's his concern? That by lach we have a gzeira. Ugzeira shema yomru motziin mikli shares lechol. A very subtle concern. Says the Gemara, I'm concerned that because the liquid that was initially at the bottom was now pushed out by new liquids coming in, a person might misinterpret that as saying that you can take something out of the kli shares and it will be deconsecrated. And that's for sure not true. Now, afal pi that really my kavana matters, but there's a concern of the optics of that liquid leaving the kli shares. And because it's nekar migava, because the liquid that's at the bottom got all the way pushed out, you're right, the gavra matters, but someone looking might assume that the liquid that was displaced and spilled over the edge was like a kli shares, that the liquid became sanctified and now it is deconsecrated. That's our gzeira derabbanan. It doesn't apply by yavesh, and therefore it only applies by ilach. So says the Gemara, a quick question and an answer, and then we're going to pause for the night. Mosiv Reb Zera, hold on one second. If your concern is that someone might see something and misinterpret, then what about the following? Let's say that sider es halechem on the wrong day. Really, the lechem should be put in the right place on the shulchan on Shabbos. You sider es halechem es habazichen le'achar Shabbos. You did it on Sunday morning. And then 6 days later, not 7 on Shabbos, it hasn't sat long enough. We need the lechem to be there all week. And then really on the 7th day on Shabbos, you're supposed to add the bazichin. And this guy only put the challah out on Sunday. He did it late, this Kohen. And then v'hiktir sabazichin b'Shabbos, it's only been 6 days, not 7. Psula. So says the Gemara, what should you do? Ketzad yaseh. How should you solve this problem? What do you do with the challahs? They were put there a day late. So the Gemara says, don't worry. Yanichena l'Shabbos haba. Leave them from Sunday of week prior to Saturday of the next week. So it'll be up for 13 days, well beyond the line of 7. And then put on the bazichin. She'afilu hu al shulchan yomim rabim ein bekach klum. Because maybe Not maybe. The assertion of the brisa is that it's a way to solve the problem without wasting the lechem upon him. If I take the lechem and put it up a day late on a Sunday, the bazichin won't work that Shabbos. Let me keep it up another week. That's fine. You're allowed to do that. Asks the Gemara of Amai, why would you allow for that to happen? Hasam nami, there too, just like the case of the lechem that was put up late, we should say the same thing over there that we have a gzera derabanan. Lema gzera shema yomru mafkidin b'kli shares. I can store something in a kli shares. Why don't we say that over there? If you're concerned by the wine, which is nekar migava, that the liquid that was at the bottom gets displaced and pushed up, and you're concerned by lach, that people might say that it got there's from a kli shares you can go from holy to non-holy. You should also be concerned that people are going to use a kli shares as a piece of luggage and as a piece of storage, like we saw in this case of someone who left the lechem upon him up for an extra 6 days, an extra 7 days. Says the Gemara, Pnei machutz karamis. You're asking a question about something that's in the heichal. Who in the world is going to go into the heichal? A handful of people who are all zrizin. They're all kohanim. Nobody else is going in there. Panim lav kule al mayodi. Nobody knows what's going on in the heichal except for that kohen himself. And he'll tell his peers, leave this one up, an extra one. I put it on a day late. You don't have to worry about the optics of the public, and we don't have to worry about the optics of the kohanim, because kohanim are zrizin. But chutz kule al mayodi. But when people are able to see into the Azara, not the Heichal, in the Azara, you have the Ezras Yisrael that overlooks into the Azara. You can see everything. There, kule al mayodi. And therefore, the Gemara concludes this, again, within the third sheet, within Rabbi Yossi, that our concern is only Gzeira derabanan by lach, that because lach gets displaced and pushed out first, if someone was watching the Azara and they saw the liquid get displaced, and then nobody did anything with it, oh, no big deal, then they would assume that which is in a kli shares, and now that it left the kli shares, it's not holy anymore. That's a real concern in certain cases. And since over here, technically speaking, the outside of the kli is not kodesh, it was only nimshecha mibifnim, and not nimshecha bachutz, we had to put a gzera derabanan in, according to Rabbi Yossi, to make sure that people would not mistake something that exits a kli shares, that it is considered to be deconsecrated, because generally that's not true. We'll stop right here at Tnan. Mirza Hashem will pick up tomorrow night 5-6 lines from the bottom of Tzadiyam and Aleph. I do have a flight tomorrow afternoon back to Chicago. If my flight's on time, then we will be on time. If not, then I'll have Rabbi Handler sub for us. We'll pause right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.